Hello, I'm Travis Fish, and I'm joined by my co-host Tom Rees, and we've worked in UK hospitality operations for our whole career. This is the Ops Club podcast, a show in which Tom and I discuss what's really going on in UK hospitality, or at least in our small corner of it. And each week we'll be talking to a different industry operator about how they're coping and what's on their mind right now. Hello Tom, how are you today? Lovely to see you.
I'm very good, mate. Very good.
It is lovely to see
What
you.
you been up? Yeah. It's always lovely to chat. What have you been up to? Anything good?
I've been out and about as usual. I had an interesting experience this week in I don't know if we're naming brands or not, but in a high street lunchtime grab and go establishment. I don't know if it's fair or not to name people, but I was using their self checkout technology, which I'm usually a big fan of, and I couldn't work out why it wasn't working. I couldn't pay. I thought, you sort of get that fear of, am I being the moron that doesn't know how to use this?
Yeah.
And
Middle-aged man can't
exactly.
use tech.
Dithering, trying to get out to his next meeting and grab some prepared food so he doesn't have to bother queuing at a normal place. And I couldn't get to work, and like 20 seconds feels like 20 minutes when your PDQ machine's not firing up. And eventually I had to ask a team member who was sort of loitering in the checkout area, and he was totally unfazed, informed me that this happens every single time they have a peak hour.
That's so frustrating to hear that.
It's just like some sort of technology, overload, server overload. I'm not a technologist in all as much as you might think, and that it happens all the time, happens regularly across many sites. And yeah, I guess in some ways that was more disappointing to me than if it was like a
Yeah.
power outage or the internet was down or some one-off issue or even just me being a moron.
Yeah.
The fact that he was so blasé about it that actually I'm pretty sure now that's why he was stationed there in the sort of checkout area to deal with this problem when it arose. And it was happening all over the more I looked up. So yeah, very frustrating as someone who's a big proponent of tech to see that. Yeah, I guess just infrastructure being not fit for purpose.
Yeah.
So yeah, slightly frustrating hospitality week for me.
Yeah, but it's interesting. I just think that happens a lot of the time. I think like not all tech is created equal, right?
Yeah.
I read an interesting quote from Itsu founder Julian Metcalf, who was talking about their use of tech in some of their new sites, and he thinks they've overdone it, or they overdid it. I think the quote is post-COVID, and they're taking some of the screens out because not everyone wants to use screens. And interestingly, it didn't drive basket value, which is what they thought it would do.
Yeah.
Which is, I don't know if that's a bit of human behavior, like if you don't feel maybe that pressure if you're being upsold or whatever to choose something.
It's really hard to know because I was in Euston Station recently. Actually, twice I've been to Euston Station recently. One time, grabbing lunch on the way to my train, I opted to go to Itsu because I knew I could grab and go, and I knew it would be quick.
Yeah.
And then the second time, I actually chose to try Tortilla, which is exactly next door. That Tortilla doesn't have screens. That's an old school, counter service setup, a human service. And actually, the reason I didn't use it the first time I'd gone past, I actually prefer Tortilla, was because I thought it would take too long. And actually, that Tortilla absolutely nailed the sort of process along that cook line.
Yeah.
And actually, I think it was actually quicker because they are experts in getting me through that queue.
Yeah.
In a way that me fumbling through an Itsu, I go there once a year, is not actually very efficient now that I think about it.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Well, I just, me, I'm not like tech phobic.
You're a bit analog, aren't you?
No, like but not tech for tech's sake, or not if it's at the detriment of like, the guest experience, which I guess is subjective. But I think some guests don't want the interaction. I guess is the reality. But I think it's always better, and I think you probably, in the same way that we as humans like struggle to deal with the idea of driverless cars like hitting someone, but they might humans hit like way more people potentially. But it's okay if it's a human that does it. It's sort of, it's more frustrating if the machine doesn't work, whereas if a sort of human doesn't work or is a bit slow or something, you might forgive them a bit. Or
well, we accept humans being imperfect, don't we?
Yeah, I'm always an advocate of, human. I think services is humans human, like that's the way. But not all tech has to be about just the service point. I thought we had a really interesting conversation with our guest today, Matt Grimshaw from Youda, which is not a business that I was aware of before, but absolutely loved chatting to him. Thought he had a really great take on how tech can help and sort of what it's there for. And it's a really interesting bloke all round, not least choice of bar snacks, which is where we kicked it off. So let's dive right into that.
This episode is brought to you by Williams Stanley & Company, modern accountants for ambitious hospitality brands. From accounting and payroll to smarter data systems, they give you clear numbers you can actually use to run the week, not just file at year-end. If you want a partner who knows hospitality and moves fast, talk to Williams Stanley & Company. Learn more at williamsstanley.co.
Why don't you give us a very brief insight into how you founded Youda and kind of a bit your background? Did you ever, have you always wanted to be the founder of an AI processing company, et cetera, et cetera?
Growing up in the 80s, the one thing I really wanted to do.
Yeah, I remember I had a interview once, and someone said, "What would be your job if you could do any job in the world?" And this was for an operations manager role in a now almost defunct brand. I think there's still a couple of them somewhere. And I said, "What do you mean? Like anything?" And he said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, I'd be a professional footballer." and he rolled his eyes and was like, "Oh, no. What do you mean?" And I was like, "Oh, no, sorry. I'd be an operations manager for this company." Like, you don't grow up dreaming of this stuff. But I absolutely love my job, but I didn't necessarily think I was going to be doing this.
My opinions on the work have evolved since I was 8.
Yeah. Tell us what you thought you were going to be doing then.
Well, when I was a kid, what did I think I was going to be doing? I don't know, really. For a while, I wanted to play professional rugby. So rugby went professional when I was about 15.
Yeah.
And I was in the sort of first intake of academy kids.
Oh, wow. What position did you play?
I used to play scrum half. Long story short, not nearly tough enough to play professional rugby. So I had to have 2 shoulder reconstructions, split a disc in my back, snapped my leg in half, dislocated my ankle, tore lots of ligaments in my... Yeah, so I just didn't...
Yeah, break yourself.
Oh, my God.
If you're ever in my presence and I try and do any physical exercise now, I sound like a sort of 12th century French wardrobe moving about. So, yeah, I didn't manage to do that. Went and did some different things. I worked as a speechwriter for an MP for a little bit.
Oh, wow.
And then ended up getting a job in a company called DS Smith, which at the time was a FTSE 250 packaging manufacturer, grew quite significantly, went into FTSE 100 and just been bought. And this was about 2008 when the market just took a crash with the financial crisis. And I became involved in cost reduction program. I used to work for the finance director, the HR director there. And actually where we had things going into automotive industrials, that sort of thing, then that we lost quite a lot of the order book very quickly.
Yeah.
It wasn't very popular, as you can imagine. Like, if you're doing that work, no one really likes you.
Yeah,
Probably exacerbated by the fact that I was, in my early 20s or whatever it is, and thought I had an opinion people should listen to and all that sort of stuff. But learnt loads. And then when the market started to recover, the question in that business was really, how do you hold on to a lower cost base and respond to increasing demand? And we didn't really have huge opportunities to automate lines and that sort of thing. It was really, how do you make fewer people work more productively?
Yeah.
And the answer, it turns out, is you've got to go and ask them. So I got involved in a lot of that work and trying to work out a way of just engaging frontline team members in improving the business. And culturally, that really just wasn't the way that the business had been run. And parts of we had Victorian paper mills, parts of this business were quite old. And it just turns out that if you ask people, they have ideas and you can do something with it.
Yeah. And
I've met lots of great people within that business. So I was the guy who tried stuff. It didn't work. And then better people came along afterwards and actually did some really good work off the back of it. But I remember meeting a load of people who, had worked on the machines or working on the machines, and just giving them a voice and an opportunity to try stuff and to make change had enormous impact. And I remember meeting a guy who'd said, Matt's first time in 15 years anyone around here has asked my opinion on anything, and that really stung. And stung because just on a personal level, like I'm a pretty convinced atheist. I think you've got 70, 80 years of life, whatever it's going to be, and you're going to spend a third of your life asleep. So that's about 25 years just gone straight off the bat. And then the next biggest investment of everyone's time is their work.
Yeah.
And I don't quite know why, but I just really love shop floor environments, like whether that's a manufacturing facility or like a restaurant or healthcare facilities, or like where people are doing jobs where they're sort of on their feet, usually making something. That I just love those environments.
It feels real, right? You can like see the products, and you kind of see the process through. It's that connection to it rather than the sort of Marxist alienation of I'm just a cog in a machine.
Yeah. And the intimacy with your customer as well, like even retail where you're not usually making something per se, but there's like this immediacy to it as well, which I really like. And in most of those environments, in my view, work is pretty mediocre. Like if you ask people how's the job, they'll go, oh, that's fine. And actually, the things that are the redeeming features of the job are often nothing to do with the company. It's like the people you work with and how, the people, the personal relationships rather than the structure in which you work. And that just like agitates me. I'm like, why are we spending so much time in mediocre? And then I don't know if you remember, but like late 2000s, we had this wave of research coming out of the positive psychology movement. So people like Martin Seligman and Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, like all this research about like actually how could you get people to a point where they're happier or more productive, in this state of flow or more productive. And so I was like, oh, cool. Well, look, there's some science here. Why don't I try and take some of these, things that appear to be backed by some research and go and try and make them work in companies. So I then sort of ended up working as a consultant just over 12 years. And I was desperate to prove that you could make people happy, make customers happy and make more money, because I've always been convinced that you have to be able to show it makes more money for it to be sustainable. Anyone can make your people happier for 6 months by chucking money at it. But if you don't if it doesn't return for you, you have to divest and then everyone gets cynical and it doesn't stick.
Yeah.
The key to it is, can you make it work in the context of the business? And I basically end up trying to run randomized control trials or drugs trials in retailers and restaurant chains and that sort of thing. So you take a management practice, you'd create like a control group and an intervention group, and you just let it run and see if you could evidence the difference. And Youda is the culmination of 10 years of trying to do that, basically. And lots of interesting experiences along the way, lots of things we learned, lots of qualified successes, lots of things we thought would work really well and didn't, and vice versa. And I'm really the guy who, like, every time I finished a project, I try and learn something from it and go and do some more reading and try and understand why things panned out the way they did. And then, frankly, staying in a problem for a very, very long time, you get to a point where you're like, oh, okay, I think I now know what we need.
That's really interesting, because in operations, quite often you don't stay in the problem for hardly any time. It's about deal with this right now and then move on, and then tomorrow. And we say this all the time, is that 15, 20 years or whatever in operations, like we're dealing with the same things. The same problems are constantly coming up, and it's rare that you get time to kind of deep dive, sit in it and solve it. Like we're not solving it. We just go on the next cycle and kind of change it a little bit and then move on.
My observation would be, so the problem that Youda's really trying to solve, so just for like context for people, maybe Youda's an agentic AI platform for hospitality teams. So basically what we do, we create little robots that get rid of your admin. But the interesting thing we're doing is we're using those agents to generate a new data set on people's behavior at work and people's behavior in context at work. And we're trying to use that to train a machine learning for causal inference. And what that will allow us to do is solve what I think is the fundamental problem in people management, which is no one has a way of proving what works and what doesn't work, who it works for and what it's worth to the business. Now, the reason I mentioned that about your comment about operations is I've been really lucky, worked with some really great brands, worked with some really great operators in my time as a consultant. And I would say that people management is what I would think of as a complex adaptive system. So you have you have so many factors that influence people's behavior that at the outset, it's very difficult to understand the causal relationship between what you do and the outcome. And people like to pretend that it's more simple perhaps than it actually is. What you find with experienced operators is that they learn the craft of great operations, and they learn what I would think of as the carpenter's angle. Does that make sense? Like if I'm a carpenter, I'm making the table. I don't necessarily measure it out with set, but I can see the angle. And you get these rules that, particularly, I think really great operators are prepared to take what I would think of as a slightly oblique approach. Does that make sense? Like when you're acting in complexity, sometimes if you try and rush to the answer or hit the thing you want straight away, you get the wrong result. The most obvious one I've seen lots of time is how you reduce your labor spend. Right? You can take hours out of next week's shift, right, and bring it back in line because your area manager's told you to do it. But it will almost certainly damage the long-term performance of your business if you keep reaching for that lever. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
And it's this pattern recognition over time that I think gives great operators the confidence not to rush for a short-term result in order to get a long-term result. And at the moment, the only way to get operators into that position is, as you said, Tom, like 10, 15 years of experience. You've got to learn the hard way that if you reach for a short-term result and try and pull the lever on labor or whatever it is, actually you're going to spike turnover in 6 months' time, and then you've got an even bigger problem. Or you're going to kill customer service, and then you're going to kill your business in 9 months' time. I'm a huge admirer of like really, really good operators. But the challenge I think that we hope to be able to help with is often you have to work against the data structures within your business in order to do the right thing. We got a bit I thought we would get. It's not like we got.
Can you explain
quite deep, quite quickly?
That's if you were hoping for light Friday morning amusing stuff, I've completely not hit the brief.
Elevator pitch to me, Youda. No. This is brilliant. This is the stuff though. And I think that there's loads of stuff that I want to pick up on. I think what you talked about, your early sort of wanderings onto the shop floor and talking to people about solving these problems of reducing transient spend to sales that is our job. That's one of the key parts of sort of operator's job, and it's the constant challenge. And you hit upon something which is go and ask people, go and talk to people. And I've been in big businesses and small businesses where people think it's chess pieces around a board. It's very easy to say, reduce your forecast, here's your number. But that translates to real people, real challenges, and it's the complicated process behind that, and the knock-on impact to what that will mean over the coming weeks, and all of the stuff that you mentioned.
I think one of the things I've noticed about the best operators is they literally see different things to everyone else. So, have you come across the invisible gorilla experiment?
Yes. Yeah.
So if people haven't seen it...
Oh, that's interesting. I have not. Can you explain?
We used to do it at M&B all the time. It was only the training program, mate. Weren't you paying attention?
Obviously not. Or in 17 years, I don't remember.
So I'll spoil it for everyone. You go on YouTube, type in the invisible gorilla. The video will say there's 2 teams of 3. Each of them got a basketball. One's in white T-shirts, one's in black T-shirts. And the instruction, I think, is, can you count the number of passes between the team in white T-shirts? So you merrily watch it, counting the number of passes. Yeah. And about halfway through the video, someone will walk out in a gorilla suit, do a crazy dance, and walk off again. And when you are watching it for the first time and counting the passes, roughly 2/3 of people will not notice that someone in a gorilla suit walks into the middle of the video, dances, and moves off again. And for me, it's an illustration that the way in which you construe your environment, or the narrative that you bring into your environment, influences literally what you perceive, what you see. So, Travis, do you remember Oni from Nando's? Used to run. Mm-hmm. So I was with there was the guy called Oni, ran a Nando's restaurant. Just a wonderful guy,
huge character,
but also physically, just had this incredible. He was a Nigerian guy. He just had this warmth, and you just felt like. You walk into Oni's restaurant, and it was just hospitality. It was just I'm looking after you. This is my place. This is my energy. Yeah, he was wonderful at it. Anyway, I was talking to Oni about the restaurant, and he was getting really agitated as we were sat there chatting. And at about 15 minutes in, he said, "Matt, I'm really sorry. I'm going to stop you. There's a wet menu over there." And literally from the corner of his eye, I'd seen this wet menu, and it was really, really bothering him.
Yeah, it's just chipping away at him.
Yeah, just chipping away at him. And if you you talked about operators going in to look for and talking to people and look for, but it really makes a difference what you see. Does that make sense? Like, and that experience over time that gives you a frame of like, actually, when I go into operations, like, am I looking at whether the team feel physically comfortable in the space, or are smiling to each other, or interacting with each other, or am I looking at the way in which the environment shapes the customer? Does that make sense? There's lots of like, there's so much interesting stuff that people don't see if you go in and go, I need to cut the labor number, or I need to have a go at these people because like their waste is 3% too high. And you never get to the interesting things that you can change to influence long-term performance.
Yeah, and I think that it was interesting what you're saying about evidencing the change, because I think we work in such a dynamic environment, fast-paced environment with so many inputs, that I think we struggle a lot in operations to understand exactly what is the thing that you've done that impacts, that gets the result out the other side.
Yeah.
When I'm interviewing people, general managers and operations managers, I always ask them about labour. I ask them about the challenge of labour and how they'd manage that question if they got pushed to cut their labor. And really what I'm looking for is something that's a bit more like the answer that you sort of gave. It's thinking about the impacts of it and how you manage it long term for the benefit of the whole place. But one of the other things we talk about is sort of how you repeat things. And if you've got a good result in a place, because anyone can come in and say I grew sales by 20%, but if you don't know how you did it and what you did to have an impact, then it's a sort of, it could be a one-off, could be luck. Could have a competitor close down next to you. We don't do that enough. I think it's sort of hold on to, like, really identify, okay, what do we do that had a really positive impact? And like generally we think we know. What can Youda do, I guess? What does it do to help operators and kind of have an impact? What's the key impact that you'd say?
Time back. First thing is, you got to give, like, I think if I look across the industry now, I think it has become accepted that managers will spend probably a day a week, maybe more, on a laptop.
Yep.
And the reality is, I think when you're looking at performance within an organization, you need to see performance as being like intention, right? There's things you can introduce that would pull it more towards what you want, but there are also things that are holding it back. And the most common thing that holds something back is time constraint. Like, you only have a certain, like, you only have 40 hours in a week or whatever it is as a manager. And if, I don't know, 8-10 of those are spent on admin, then you've just got less time to spend. Lots of managers in restaurants are a bit like football managers with their back to the pitch on their laptop. Does that make sense? If you're not seeing how people perform and behave and interact, then you can't coach or improve performance.
It's a funny one. The whole laptop thing is so we used to have offices. So people were literally in the office, and you hear this phrase of, I'm not an office manager, I like to be on the floor. But the pervasiveness of laptops now means that you're kind of bringing the office onto the floor, which is a secondary problem.
In some ways, I wonder if it's worse, because actually, like, if you would go to the office for a specific thing, and then you're back and you're present because there's no mobile phones and no laptops. And now you default to a laptop because it's more comfortable, I think, is what often happens.
But it's much easier to identify managers who don't want to be on the floor and be present with their team and present in service, because they literally weren't there. Whereas now they can duck and dive, be on a laptop for 2 minutes and kind of get lost in it and not really be focused.
No, I think it's right. And I think the other thing is the laptop work, the bigger the organization, the laptop work is actually the work that becomes most visible. Like your multi-site, actually, what you get feedback loops on is, have you done your laptop work? Like, are your rotas in, et cetera, et cetera. So there is this sort of management pull, if you like, to like delivering what is being demanded from the center. So for Youda, like, what we're trying to do is really get rid of as much of the people admin as we can. So you can get agents now to do probably about 80% of the job of an HR administrator, or those tasks that typically fall on frontline managers. So things like, we can automate, return to work checks if people have been off sick, or we can help people renew visas when it's expiring, or we can automatically onboard people and set them up with the right training, accounts, and all that sort of thing. Or you can also make the agents answer people's questions. So if you go on the bot and say, what's the recipe for this, or what's the policy? So we're just trying to take away, the faff that comes from managing people. Like, there's just, you employ tens of people, hundreds of people, thousands of people. You just generate a volume of stuff that has to be dealt with for you to stay, to keep the show on the road. You can get agents to manage as I say, about 80% of that, so that managers are only having to get involved where there's something that genuinely needs a human to sort it. And same for people teams, really, and giving them that time back to reinvest in hopefully improving the performance of the business.
Yeah. When I was really deep in service in my own business and kind of there all day, every day for the first sort of 6 months of when we opened, I pictured it as like there were things that were taking me away from the bar and the floor and away from the team, chasing maintenance or doing, accounts or admin or paper, whatever it is, all the admin that goes with operations and running a small company. But it was like I was getting further away from where I wanted to be, which was talking to a guest, leaning on the bar, chatting to a regular, because that's what the real stuff is, like coaching a team member on shift, and I was realizing that the team members weren't getting a great brief or learning about the beers that we had on because we were in the back worried about things. So it's like I was physically getting taken away. Even if you're sat there on a laptop, you are sort of out of it.
Yeah.
And so all of that stuff stacks up and takes you away. Really what you want to do is reduce it all so you can get back. And if I walk into a business, the general manager's standing at the host desk, brilliant. That's exactly what I want. You want everything to be done.
Yeah.
But I don't really care. It's not the important bit. It just needs to be done. And whether that's delegated out and everyone's got their own little bit, or whether it's done through a smart agentic AI platform, it feels like that's the future. It's sort of push things through, streamline tech and tech that works for you, and then you get more time on the floor.
Yeah, what we'd like. So I think the magic of hospitality is a lot of what makes you good is like practical wisdom. Does that make stuff you can't learn out of a textbook? And it can be very simple things like physical proximity to people. Does that when you talk to them, or like very simple things like whether you square your shoulders to talk to someone or you talk to someone on a half turn has a huge impact on how they'll feel about whether you've actually taken them seriously, or those sorts of things. Or like the ability to talk about a beer or a dish or where it's come from or what makes it special, or those you get in great hospitality businesses, you get these like master apprentice type relationships. So every great hospitality operator I've spoken to will give you their lineage. They go, I went and worked for this person and I learned this. And then I went and worked for this person and they taught me about this. And I couldn't quite make that work for me like this, but I tried it like this. And it's like this transfer of it's like learning to be a potter or a carpenter. Like it's a practical skill that you have to observe someone doing, try it for yourself, mess it up a bit, try again, get some nudges, some feedback. And that feedback, I think we sometimes try to formalize too much. Like the feedback can actually be, I'm not going to tell you anything about it, but as a manager, I'm going to make sure I give you an example of how I would want you to do it. And you see it. Very subtle.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. Yeah, that is a sort of way of thinking about how we train up, because so much of training is just sort of people learn by watching, as like osmosis, sort of going through a shift, and sort of that felt good, that shift was good, what did we do and sort of learning themselves and reflecting, and quite often just go, and most of the time it's going through terrible shifts and thinking, right, what did we
what do I not want to do again?
The horror shifts that we've all been in, and you stop at the end of it and just think, right, I'd never want to do that again. How do we prevent that? And that is a sort of that kind of apprenticeship thing, and you're so right. It's more like learning an old trade, and I think about it's like seller management is sort of something that is sort of dropped out. I mean, there used to be seller men when we started, and it was like that was a job that's just completely gone now.
Yeah.
And the whole industry is complaining about the poor quality of cask beer. Well, no wonder, because no one's doing that sort of apprenticeship kind of vibe, learning and taking that. You think you can just stick it on a page, train everyone, and you'll be able to do it, but you can't.
Yeah, so I hope our contribution to that from a Youda perspective is giving some time back for that, and giving managers the confidence to actually, my job is to be with my team. That's what everything else is kind of a distraction from that. And hopefully, and then coming back to what I mentioned earlier about the causation piece, showing that that's actually what drives business results, so that people directors can have the data that says, if we do this and we reinvest the time like this, this is what the results you will get and the time frame you will get those results in, so that people have the confidence to stick with the right thing over the medium to the long term.
Listening to you talk, Matt, is it makes so much sense. So I think one of the really nice things I picked off your websites. I don't know if it's your sort of mission statement or your vision or whatever, but it says that your purpose is to make 100 million people happier at work.
Yeah.
And I love that, because it doesn't speak to any specific sort of thing. That's the overall goal. And listening to you speak, your background and kind of what you're trying to achieve, very people focused, relationship focused kind of approach. That makes sense. And I thought that was quite a unique thing to have.
Yeah, so our goal, so we're starting with hospitality, but I think what we're building is probably useful to anyone who's doing a sort of on your feet frontline deskless job. So like retail's quite a similar space, healthcare, social care, construction, all those sorts of things. So that's like our end user, if you like. And there's just lots of those. There's probably about 1 billion of those workers in Europe and North America. Like it's the bulk of the economy. From a business building perspective, the really interesting thing is those jobs, those frontline jobs, they'll probably be augmented by AI, as in people will be working alongside some AI, but they're not going to get replaced by AI. Does that mean you're not going to get an agent to be a nurse? You can't create AI that cooks a good plate of food and those sorts of things. Whereas white collar admin, you sort of lawyers, accountants, etc. I actually, from what I've seen, I think we're on the cusp of mass replacement of those roles by AI.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's who we're trying to serve, if you like, and we're just very, very determined to do it in a data-led way. As I say, having spent 10 years trying to prove that you can actually do it, I think we found the way of modeling the data that would allow us to get there. And for people directors now, people directors are basically in the same position marketing directors were in 1990. Like if you're a marketing director in 1990, the quote goes, you're wasting half your ad budget. The problem is you don't know which half. And then Google Ads comes along, and suddenly there's a way in marketing to evidence the relationship between an ad and an outcome, a sale. And suddenly the digital advertising market goes from about 0 in the year 2000 to, I think, about 65 billion today. And it's because businesses want to invest in something with a predictable return. Now, if you jump across to the people space, there is no way at the moment of investing in a predictable return. Like if I said, if you're a people director and you've got a budget, like, where are you going to put your bets in order to achieve this outcome? You can exercise your judgment. You can do things that you think are sensible, but no one can prove or demonstrate that causal relationship. And I think, our big vision really is we think we can solve that problem from a data perspective. And if and when we do that, you change the dynamic in people from having to manage budgets on cost. Like I've only got 100 grand, I'll put 5 on well-being, I'll put 10 on training, etc., to being able to invest in value. Like if I invest 15k in this training program, I will expect to get this result. Or if I invest 5k in well-being, I know that in 6 months' time, I'm going to reduce our attrition from X to Y. Or, if we put in an extra, whatever it might be, and switch to a 4-day working week, actually within the year will be net up because our attrition will have dropped, performance will have improved, etc., etc. So that's what we're trying to do. If we give people the data to make better decisions, then I think that's how we make people happier at work.
Yeah. No, that's a really, really interesting approach. I think balance is a kind of real world. How do we, you have to appeal to the people that are holding the budgets and want to see, bang for their buck, but also have something that really works on the ground and is kind of proven to actually do what we say you're going to do. I think one of the things that always sticks with me is the massive impact you can have with what I perceive to be really small gestures.
Yeah.
And so you talked about just the guy that, and I won't do as good a accent as you do, but the guy said this is the first time someone's asked my opinion in 15 years. That would have had such a big impression on that chap. And I often think about conversations. I used to love working in the kitchens because you get such interesting characters in hospitality, people from all over the world. I always remember we had a sous chef in a restaurant he was a mayor back in Brazil. He'd come over and I was,
did you say mayor?
A mayor of a small town.
Amazing.
I did a trial shift once with 5 guys, and the guy next to me on the grill was a brain surgeon.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah,
like
yeah.
it's like this is the magic of hospitality that people didn't realize. So it was a
Yeah.
guy who was he was an Egyptian national. He worked at the Radcliffe Hospital in Oxford as a brain surgeon 4 days a week, but he didn't really like being a brain surgeon, and he'd always wanted to work in hospitality. But because he'd been trained as a doctor, his dad had paid for it. Well, he felt obliged to keep doing it. But he
Yeah.
came in 2 days a week to work in Five Guys because he liked that's what he actually wanted to do.
Amazing. I love that. Yeah, there's these amazing characters, and so you find out all these things, and I'm always amazed at the strength of a relationship that you can build on such a small amount of input and time, just because you've bothered to sort of ask someone
Yeah.
that question, and then you realize, well, that was the thing. They just wanted to, like, not that person was craving me going and asking them about their life, but just that small bit of human connection, showing that someone cares, someone's interested in me, made such a difference. And then you get great output from it. And then from a sort of ruthless business perspective, they'll work hard. And when you ask them to I'm sorry, I've got to cut your hours next week, or can you get a little bit more output for the same time, you get it. And and that's how you kind of get blood out of a stone. Which is quite often the sort of central challenge of running a hospitality business sometimes,
I also think, Tom, I don't know if your experience, like, I do think there is come back to that apprenticeship thing, like social skills, the ability to make someone feel comfortable, or the ability to get someone engaged with you in a conversation. The very authentic, natural sort of behaviors you want to see show up in service.
Yeah.
I don't want to be one of those like really old, like grumpy old men, like, kids spend so much time on a computer they don't know how to talk. But like there is a sort of I think a need, I don't know if it's growing or not, or if it was always the case, but like this cultivation of the ability just to get into a conversation with people.
Yeah.
And like if you don't do that with your team, they're not going to replicate it with your customers.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we just underestimate the sort of degree of cultivation you need to do within a culture in order to create the right sort of environment. I think people most often change their behavior or learn by copying. And the more you see within a culture that like the way to fit into this team, be accepted by this team, is to be personable and to care about each other, that the more likely it is that people will pick that up by osmosis and start reflecting that in their own behavior. So if someone's got half a foot in hospitality and half a foot out, the number of times you see businesses pushing things and pushing strategies and pushing plans that are actually going to undermine the core of what makes a great hospitality business is really, really interesting and sometimes quite sad.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think having like a relentless pace, which our industry does, kind of doesn't allow people to sort of sit for a long time in the problems like you talked about, and then that need to just make a decision to do something.
Yeah,
it quite often then drives not necessarily like really bad outcomes or negative consequences, but just doesn't solve the problem. So I think something that you ask, I don't know about you, Trav, but if you ask AGMs or junior sort of management in your business, what would you like to work on? What training do you think you need in order to sort of move to that next step? And they say the same thing. It's like, I want to know a bit more about finances and the P&L, or learn the P&L. You think, well, and I always say to them, look, I can teach it to you in 10 minutes, right? It's like, it's reading, but it's not maths. I know it's a load of numbers, but it's just this is what you did. This is the budget. That's the difference. Like it's being able to manage a P&L is about understanding that, okay, you've spent 500 quid on napkins and your budget was 400. And the reason why you spent 500 is because you're using them to mop up spills instead of the blue roll, which is a quarter of the price. And so how do you change that behavior? Well, it's all people. So, brief the team, train them, explain the cost difference, put an incentive on the board for reducing that, napkin use or whatever it is. And that is how you then get the change. And then you'll see the number on the P&L, but they obsess with that because I don't know, and that's always the thing that people are sort of want to do. And quite often, what happens is we do okay. Well, let's do a training session about P&Ls, and it doesn't actually change anything because those people don't learn the people skills needed to actually change the problem on the ground.
But I guess that's sort of like people are taking the lead of what they see their leaders doing. They see their leaders spending time on a computer looking at numbers. So they think that's they're being shown by behavior the wrong things that they should be focused on, right? I'm sure.
Yeah, and I think that the interesting thing from my perspective about AI and automation and stuff like that is that hopefully it does exactly what you're saying, Matt, and kind of gives everyone more time. And then once you've streamlined a lot of the necessary but boring and kind of not that important, they are important but not to the sort of the team and the operation, that those processes, you actually just sort of slightly change the job of a restaurant operator, or pub operator, which is just be with your team, more time with your team, and really focus on those soft skills. So it will kind of allow the job to be just the bit that we want it to be.
Yeah. There's in the tech space, there's one of the things people are talking about is, so the cost of building tech now is dropping rapidly. The speed at which you can build it, the cost at which you can build it. I mean, I wouldn't believe everything. You can't produce production ready stuff with it. But the general trend is it will get cheaper and easier to build stuff. As that continues, the argument is that the only differentiator is taste. Like, do you have good taste for a product that you want to build? And I think that's what hospitality businesses ought to be reflecting on is, okay, if we can get rid of all this stuff, then really the success of our business comes down to taste. And I'd lift the curtain back before, we had a much better podcasting conversation before we started this episode about bar snacks, right? But it's that. Does that make sense? Like, if you get rid of all the other stuff, you can have a 20-minute taste conversation about, let's talk about the welcome experience we want to give people, or you can get into the taste, both of the product and the experience, and your
and the brand and.
As an operator and as a brand owner in that space, to really think about, if everyone could build exactly the same as quickly as possible, what makes someone want to come here rather than somewhere else?
Yeah, no, I mean, we were talking to absolutely legendary operator on a previous episode. He's built and sold brands and worked in lots of things, been in the industry for 40 odd years, and kind of asked him that question of why do brands go on this life cycle? And isn't there? I mean, Pizza Express is an amazing example of a brand that's just stayed. You can pick holes in what it is quality wise if you want, or it's changed a bit in the people's eyes, but it's still there and it's still doing it, and it's had this amazing sort of consistency. Whereas lots of brands grow and die, and his answer as to why was just like obsessing over the detail and that energy and that focus that founders bring, and then it sells and you lose it and it dissipates and you get the wrong people. And
can I offer a point of view on that?
Yeah.
So I got sort of one foot in hospitality, one foot in tech, right? If you looked at the two, there's a real irony that in hospitality businesses tend to churn out their founders. Right?
Yes.
Whereas big tech businesses, if you look at the performance of it, if you get rid of your founder from a tech business, you significantly underperform your peer set.
Right.
In almost all circumstances, better off sticking with your founder than trying to bring in a professional CEO. And you have these tech founders who have lots of them have very poor people skills. You think of your classic tech founder. They don't have great people skills. If you had to pick, who's going to be able to manage an organization of 10,000 people, is it this one or this one? I think most people would instinctively go for the hospitality founder, who often tends to have really great people skills, really attuned to culture, ability to influence people, etc., etc. What's interesting is Reid Hoffman, the guy who set up LinkedIn, has this thing called the people stages of growth. And his view is that, to sort of paraphrase, as you grow, you accumulate social complexity. Social complexity accumulates as a factor of relationships, not number of employees. So you get an exponential growth, and you get these breaking points within the growth of an organization where basically the way you managed it up to that point will start to slow down your growth after that point. And the most obvious one in hospitality is a concept. Have you come across a concept called Dunbar's number?
I've heard of it, but I can't remember what it is.
So Robin Dunbar, American anthropologist at Oxford, was really interested, why do monkeys and apes spend so much time grooming each other and picking nits off each other? Because they don't eat the nits, and it's not about mating behavior. It's often same-sex pairs picking nits off each other. So in theory, evolution ought to have driven this behavior out as a complete waste of everyone's time. Actually, what he discovered was it's literally you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. It's about forming reciprocal bonds. So so you can't see this on the podcast, but Travis is the biggest ape in this group of three. So if Tom and I spend the afternoon merrily picking nits off each other and Travis comes and picks on me, then Tom's more likely to stand up for me. And it's the way in which they moderate the behavior, particularly of the alpha male within the group. And what Dunbar found was the amount of time a species spends grooming correlates with group size. So the more investment in grooming and reciprocal relationships, the bigger groups you can manage, which tends to give you an evolutionary advantage. And the bigger group size you have also correlates with brain complexity in the prefrontal cortex, because you need a brain that stays on top of who's in with whom. So Travis doesn't clumsily come and pick on me and the two of us, give him a dig to the ribs. If you extrapolate that to what the human brain looks like, Dunbar's view is that humans ought to be able to manage social groupings of about 100 to 150 people just on gossip. So his view is that we evolved language as a more efficient way of forming reciprocal relationships than picking nits off each other, because you can gossip with more than one person at a time. So actually, if you listen into how people tend to use language, most of it seems to be about forming reciprocal relationships rather than conveying information. So like we'll have a gossip about the football results, like we're all into football, or like Game of Thrones, or like that makes sense. Like we're trying to form these like, are we in the same camp? Can we get on?
We're all part of the same tribe. We're doing the same similar things,
And then what you get in the growth of hospitality businesses is early on, the easiest way for the founder to influence the strategy and the culture of that business is literally their personal influence. They turn up, they know what's going on in people's lives. They know the sort of motivational levers they can pull with different people. They can influence it with their personality, just with their example. But that doesn't scale. There comes a point where, as a founder, where you turn up at your restaurant and you just don't recognize the people that work for you anymore. Like, you're like, who's that? When did they join? And it's at that point that, in my opinion, you need to start building some sort of system to influence culture and behavior and decision-making. Because from that point onwards, your ability to influence your business as a founder starts to degrade. And I think you get this initial degradation in terms of like the employee experience and the culture that hits maybe between 15 and 20 sites. And then that shows up again when you get to 35 to 50 sites in the customer experience. Like it's this lag of degrading over time.
Yeah.
And it's because, in my opinion, no one has found a way yet to create a system within hospitality businesses that allows you to continue to, if you like, turn what you aspire for your culture into the reality of people's day-to-day experience. Like, how are you giving them the data you need them to make decisions? How are you treating them in a way that reflects your brand values, et cetera, which is one perspective on what we're trying to do with Youda. It's like, how do we give businesses those tools so that when they say our culture is about simplicity, that's what people experience on a day-to-day basis. Or when they say our culture is about care, there are nudges in the employee experience that continually surface that. And most interestingly, how do you get the feedback loops from the front line of a business back to the center so you can actually learn quicker than anyone else?
Yeah, no, that's fascinating, and I think it's one of these, the most sort of ethereal concepts in businesses is culture. Everyone talks about how important it is, but it's so hard to put to completely nail it down. And it's, for me, it's a sort of amorphous blob.
I get really pissed off about culture and people talking about culture, by the way. It's like it's the way to wind me up. Because most of the people who bandy about talking about culture have absolutely no idea what they're talking about. And I think, just to go back, like the scaling thing, like the brands that make it out and go further on are actually the ones that are less reliant on a customer experience to deliver business success. So QSR brands, where it's about operational, like they tend to do well. The brand you fell in love with because it had amazing service, that's really difficult to scale at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And there will always be people who will drop off from a brand as it grows, exactly like the band that was cool because they were your thing, and then they became popular, and I don't like them anymore. I'm going to go and find the next thing. And there's always going to be a little troop of people that are like that. It's really interesting what you were saying there about, correct me if I'm wrong, but almost having people who can translate that initial founder sort of vision culture it's sort of extrapolate, like you need captains on the ground who can almost build their own little bit of culture, and it might be a little bit different to that, but it's got the same flavor and it's got the same thing, and they need to own that in pockets, and it's like the pockets of all these different cultures in their teams, that because it's unique, I'll build a culture in my team that's sort of unique to me, and I want then guys to do that on the ground as well. And it's the sort of amalgamation of all of that, as long as it's close enough to that original thing, that will be strong. I experienced this sort of firsthand, where I was a part of a company that we would say had a great culture, a strong culture. I mean, that did translate to lots of social stuff, lots of going out and celebrating and drinking and kind of, but it's not the drinking that was the thing. That was connection. That was spending time together, celebrating success and chatting and just sorting problems out, in a sort of creative way after a few pints, and shared experiences and jokes and whatever. And there was one person who left, you could feel it when they left. It was like they were the person that were connecting all these things up. And it was like there was all these connections that suddenly the relationships didn't know how to work together, because this person was the one in the middle of it. And so we all had to kind of fill the gap and seal up all those relationships, but it wasn't the same. And then a few more people leave, and you're doing it all over the place. And then as you scale fast, you can't put it all back together quick enough. And so you lose the culture.
If I was trying to run a hospitality business, I would try and, all other things being equal, the more stable your teams, the better performance will get. Like, people need time to develop relationships. The more you work with people, the better you get with working with people. I think what's interesting is if you do subscribe to this view that there are like inflection points in your growth, I suspect within that team, there are people who are well suited to a given stage. I see this quite a lot in multi-site management. Like, there are multi-site managers who are better suited to different stages of growth because they require different skill sets. So I think we should celebrate that, to be honest.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, none of these stages come with like a big, like, someone walks through the office with a big sign telling you like you're 6 months away from it. Like,
Stage 3.
Yeah. We've gone into stage 2.
Yeah, we're going stage 2 next week, everybody. So, but it's like, how do you recognize?
John, you're out.
Yeah, but I think, I don't know, like, Tom, Travis, your experience, but like, I think, when you're working in a growing business, you go like, you get to maybe 10 sites, and then you can just keep doing what you did to get to 10 sites, and that'll get you to 25. And then suddenly, actually, you do need to change something in order to get the next wave of growth. And it's like, within those stages, the more stable and consistent you can create things, the better. And then, candidly, as a founder or a leader, you get this really uncomfortable bit, which is some of the people that drove our growth are not going to be appropriate for the next stage of our growth.
Mm-hmm.
And how you manage that is really interesting, because none of it comes with a big, like, clear flashing red sign that this is what's going to happen.
Absolutely. And quite often those people are brilliant at that early stage for whatever reason, and they can't make that leap. And I was thinking of the analogy of Wrexham Football Club, who have come up through the non-league, rapidly. That if you look at the team now, it's not the same guys as started in that thing, and that's a much a simpler example, because it's about sort of skill and whatever. Not to say they're not all top blokes and good lads and all the rest of it, but they can't compete at that level, and so you need to keep adding different people. And then there will be people that will say, at certain stages, I don't know if you've seen the Wrexham documentary.
This is going to be a familiar example to everyone. This is Wrexham's leading goal scorer in the conference.
Yeah. So I think his name's Paul Mullins, and he was kind of a top quality player that dropped down, helped him come through. But then he sort of hit his ceiling again, and he started to not be put in the team. And there will be lots of people that will be irate at that. So, he's our hero. He's not. He was the face of it all. He was the man. And he's just been kind of phased out. And I think he's gone on to loan someone else, and now he's not in the team. He's left. But there's a new hero. Kiefer Moore's come in, and he's the new hero. And the people that are jumping on the Wrexham bandwagon now, sort of almost like, oh yeah, they're Mullins. He was that guy before. Like, they don't have that same feeling, but there'll be some diehard fans that will never forget.
The only bit I challenge is, like, I think within hospitality business and growing businesses, the difference with sport is, like, if you can play Premier League, you're obviously a better player than conference. Actually,
exactly. Yeah. It's a simpler.
If you can take a 3-site business to 10 sites, I think your skill set is at least as valuable and as admirable as if you can take 50 sites to 100. Does that make sense? Like,
absolutely. Yeah. It was a fully fledged.
Yeah, but we have this like societal assumption that people who run bigger stuff are better.
Yes, it's eminently harder than managing, the day-to-day, every day is the same, of 50 sites. And, Like, totally agree.
I was just going to say, yeah, I've definitely found where my sort of niche is, and it's in smaller, more startup-y, more kind of early stage things. That's where I like to be. That's, you know, slightly chaotic and kind of and doing those key decisions that are close to the operation and close to people, and doing the early people stuff. And me and Travis started out in one of the biggest companies in this huge kind of structure, and I didn't. It took me a while to realize, like, amazing lessons and really great people all over the place, good business, but it wasn't. I felt a bit uncomfortable, and then I joined a little small thing, or smaller, and I was like, actually, I really like this, and then went even smaller and smaller, and you're absolutely right. Like, every operator's got their niche.
I was going to sort of move to a different topic and just dive a little bit more into sort of, we've talked a lot about like AI and how it like generally and like future looking about, like, how will it like long term help us, effectively make better decisions, know where to invest, know how, if we, like you said, like if we spend 50k here in our people team, we'll get this return. But like, as an operator, how will someone in the next year or 3 years be interacting day to day? Like I guess I'm sort of a little bit more under the hood of how Youda's working, but like I wondered if we could have some more like direct examples of how, like, because it's AI for a lot of us is very conceptual. Like it's a bit like this, but like how will a GM or a HR manager or a or someone in Tom's role as a head of operations, like how will they interact with agents? Because that is a very new thing for a lot of us.
So maybe the starting point is like AI is not at the moment one thing. So there are multiple instances of artificial intelligence that you interact with on a daily basis without realizing. Like the weather forecast is driven by a type of AI. What AI is as a like collective thing is some form of algorithm or software that has a degree of autonomy about how it solves a problem. So with like when it's traditional software, you pre-program the journey. Like it just follows the algorithm. It does it every time. It does it consistently. If you've framed the problem correctly and you understand the user journey, it works great. But the challenge with software is, those computer says no moments when you want it to do something slightly different or it doesn't understand what you want it to do. So there are lots of instances of AI, and people are already like, when you type a text message and it finishes off the word for you, that's a type of AI. So I would think in the actual operation space, I think it's useful to understand that like AI is not one thing. It's not going to show up in one consistent way. And whatever Sam Altman tells you, we're still a long way away from AGI, which is this idea that you'll get this sort of unified person type that displays intelligence. So operators, like if you're doing predictive rotoring, that's machine learning, that's AI. That's like trying to take part sales, what it knows about the environment, and make a prediction for you. What we're doing within Youda, as you say, Travis, is what's called agentic AI, which is, if you've seen this film Despicable Me, like I like to think of them like the minions, right? So what you can do now is you can use large language models to create essentially little robots, like little minions, and you give them one job to do. And you can create them with natural language. So you can give them an instruction set. So I might create an agent that says, every time we get a new starter, ask for their bank account details, check it's a real bank account, and if it is, put it on the payroll, set them up on the payroll as a new starter. Or every time someone's off sick, send them a return to work check, or all those sorts of things. And then those agents sit in an environment as a very small bit of code, and every time they spot their job, they spin up. They can access a tool set. So the tool set might be an API to into another system. It might be a set of documents. It might be a large language model. They can access the tools to do their job, and then they go back to sleep. And you can make these things manage processes like a visa renewal or a shift swap or booking a holiday or whatever, like all that stuff. You can string them together to create more complex experiences like onboarding. So you can have, like a agent that says, welcome to the business. Here's our story. I'll need digital contract, right to work check, tax declaration, compliance training, get some feedback, etc., etc.
And that might be 10 agents, I guess.
It's probably like 100 agents, to be honest with you. The way to make them useful in the real world is to keep them very, very small. The more the irony at the moment is people want agents because everyone recognizes it's kind of new and sexy. But and it's much quicker to build. But actually, most of the use cases, you want them to behave like software. You want them to behave with a high degree of consistency. And one of the ways to manage that is to keep them very small and modular. So Youda is kind of like a bit of a Lego puzzle behind the scenes where you're like clipping one agent into another. You can make them write documents. So for people teams, you can now go on Youda and say, I need a change of hours letter for Travis, and it will write the letter for you. Or, I need a promotion for Tom, and it will do that process for you. And you can make them answer questions. So if a team member goes on and says, what's the recipe for this? Or how do I book holiday? Or like, what's our parental leave policy? The agent can go away, look at a library of documentation, find the answer and pull it back for them. So you can do in my opinion, you can do loads of useful stuff. And I think you'll have more and more of this sort of stuff showing up. And the real wins are, like, as we talked about, like, how do you get rid of the admin no one wants to do, frankly? Like, no one takes enjoyment in doing that. And how do you get stuff to people at the point in time at which they need it? We've, like this, I think one of the things we've learned is the volume of questions within a hospitality business that tends to get suppressed because of just the awkwardness of continually asking stuff. Like, you imagine you're a new starter and you go into a normal hospitality operation. Like, actually, the learning curve's quite steep in terms of what you need to learn.
Yeah.
And like, let's say I come to work for you, Travis, like a week later, I've forgotten how to process a refund on a till when it's like.
Yeah, and you don't want to ask because then it puts your probation at risk, or it puts your perception at risk.
Or just no one wants to be the person who go, I know you told me this a week ago, but I've forgotten it. Or like, you're busy. Like, I don't want to disturb you. And like, perfectly reasonable, human considerations. Or you're not there. Like, I've forgotten how to change a barrel and it's 2 a.m. on a Saturday night. Like, I'm not going to call up like like, it's just that.
Call up the person that trained you.
Yeah.
You would be surprised, actually, but you get 2 a.m. phone calls.
but those sorts of things, if you knew, you could go onto an agent and it would have a video of how to change a barrel. It's like, those sorts of things are quite easy to solve for. That's what we're trying to do. And I think operators, I'd be quite keen to push for, do we have a system where we can, because you can't just drop this stuff in, if that makes sense. You have to feed it, you have to train it, you have to give it material. So I think, to be honest, the sooner you can get on this train, the better. And the other key bit is, do you have an existing tech stack that will play nicely with AI? And that's if I was that one watch out call for senior ops people over the next 2 years, is what I predict will happen is, so early adopters will jump on this. The time savings are so significant that, in my opinion, it's inevitable. Like, you won't, the potential productivity gains are so significant that it's just about when it comes through. And then your challenge would be, if you are late to this and you go, okay, cool, we need to put in an AI system, and then you discover your rota just won't talk to it, or your sales data just won't talk to it, or you can't make it access any of your learning materials. Suddenly you've got a 12, 18, 24 month transformation program just to get to the start line. Meanwhile, your customers are now 3-4 years ahead.
Yeah. Have you found that smaller operators, like to that point, smaller operators are a bit more nimble and a bit more likely to say, you know what, we're going to change that other bit of software because it speaks to multiple different things, and then you can have a nice tech stack. Is that the lingo?
Yeah. That is the phrase, Tom. If you didn't
check me out.
Our experience is we find the conversations easier in two places. The first is your sort of classic, we've got to about 100, 150 people. We're starting to think about scale properly. It's a bit of a greenfield site in terms of tech. Like, they've either got new stuff, which is quite easy to work with, or they've not got a great deal of stuff. That's quite an easy scenario for us to help people. And then at the other end of the scale is the people with sort of 10,000 people plus, where you look at the scale of the productivity gains and it's like you're talking 6, 7, 8 million quid a year, and they've got scope to run a pilot and all those sorts of things. Yeah, those would be the two like most obvious people that we're looking to speak to.
I often think about the NHS, of my interaction with, because you hear so much about the challenges of the absolute. It's like the best example of just this enormous scale legacy systems that across this massive organisation are different levels of legacy, and there's a real world example of my father-in-law he was rushed to hospital and couldn't get a document from one place to another. Like, they couldn't send it on email for some reason, and it couldn't. The two different hospitals that they're only a couple of hours apart geographically. Sort of we're on different systems and couldn't send something to the system, and that seems so bizarrely, sort of antiquated in this day and age. But obviously, it's a massive change process and political and funding and whatever. But it just feels like that from a sort of real take a step back, look at it. This sort of technology should be able to help so much with that and integrate things.
Yeah, you've got the challenge is you're only really as good as the weakest, oldest part of the system.
Yes. Yeah.
So you've got so from my point of view as a like tech startup, the exciting thing is we can build an agent way quicker than any of the incumbents because we can just stand on the shoulders of giants of all the stuff that's come through in the last 5 years. If an incumbent wanted to do what we're doing, it would take them 5 years to re-engineer their data architecture to get it to a place but if where you're backing into those sorts of systems, it's a real challenge. Like you can't, simple things like if you can't update a holiday on an API, you can't let people book holidays via an agent. Like it just won't, it won't let you do it.
Yeah.
So there is like the real world problem is as much with the legacy stuff you've got and understanding how that holds you back as much as like jumping onto some of the new interesting stuff that's coming through.
Yeah. But actually, like I speak to a lot of different multi-site operators these days, and like the appetite for leaving those legacy platforms is changing. Like I think a couple of years ago, that was a scary sort of, like there's no like we wouldn't consider that. To now, like there are large operators looking at building a tech stack, Tom, rather than using an all-in-one legacy system, because confidence is building and leaders are new leaders are coming in and people are just seeing the value. Like people are seeing what other people are doing and they're like we want a bit of that, we want a bit of that. Like I think it is changing, whereas I think even 3 years ago people were quite happy with what they sort of had trusted.
And there's a quantum, like what's now possible is a quantum different in terms of like the benefits of switching are much higher. Does that make sense? Like switching to a startup 3 or 4 years ago was maybe one day it'll be great. Now you can move and there are some big advantages quite
like
quickly.
Tomorrow.
Yeah. I also think there's been a step change in the approach of people like yourself, Matt, who like want to get really deep into the like solving certain problems, as opposed to just building something that kind of works nicely from a sort of user experience and a sort of tech perspective, and then just trying to sell it into
is maybe a small amount better, but not
because ultimately, I've often felt like this, and like post COVID. There was a massive proliferation of pay at table and that sort of thing to solve a really specific problem. But and you'd get people coming like sales guys coming around saying, "Oh, got this platform, and then you would test them, and they were just a horrible experience for your guests and for you, and would also create a problem at your bar in that you've got no control over the amount of orders piling into your bar.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a big knock-on impact. You've got to think about it really clearly about. But they sort of didn't care about any of that. It was just, I've got this thing and trying to sell you it. And you're like, well, you haven't thought about the real problems. And I think that the people like yourself and, a few other people we've spoken to recently have either experienced those problems themselves as you did in your early career, and then kind of thought deeply and then built something to solve that. But continue to sort of ask people and look for, how does this...
I don't know if this is useful to operators, but like two things I'd say just to understand how the market works. And I think this speaks a little bit, Travis, to the work you're doing with Ops Club. The first thing is the interesting stuff in the tech space tends not to be at the big conferences, right? If you've got budget for a big stand somewhere, generally you're probably not like at the cutting edge of innovation. Does that make sense? Like, I don't mean that sound like as jealous as like other people's marketing budget, but like, there's some really interesting stuff going on, but you need to go and find it a little bit. And the second bit is tech is so dynamic. Like I can genuinely hand on heart tell you that Youda is better at the end of the day than it is at the start of the day. Like we've on an average day we'll ship like 6-7 improvements to the product every single day. Now some people who may be owned by PE are probably not driving the product at that pace. But like, you can find newer tech companies who are really passionate about what they're doing, who need partners who can tell them, like, can you make it do this? Like, it's not quite working like this. And actually, in those contexts, like, the product moves forward so quickly that actually the purchasing choice, I would say, is as much about, do you want to work with this company, and do they show an appetite to like be responsive to you, as much as like, what does it do right today? And that's quite difficult, I think, because like, if you scan back 5 years, you'd expect to buy something and then the product's pretty static, like the puzzle do what the puzzle do. Whereas now, particularly with AI, because it is so fast moving, it's more like training an athlete than it is buying a fast car. Does that mean like do you want to be like, are these, can we work with this? Can we make it do what we want? Are we and have I got the time to invest in working with this to get to where I would like it to be, rather than just like, what does it do out of the box?
Where have you eaten recently that you think was really great, Matt? Going back to ops, to the hospitality industry.
One of our investors, most helpful supporters, just all around great guy, Phil Eales, co-founder at Honest, and is just now co-founder at Breadstall. Phil, one of the best operators I've ever come on. Anyway, Phil has just got involved in Breadstall. They've just started in Soho, and full disclosure, my attitude was, the world does not need another pizza place. I was like, Phil, what are you doing?
Yeah, there's great pizza everywhere. Yeah.
I was like, we have a pretty lovely open relationship. I was prepared to go and tell him that he was wasting his time on pizza. And I went and ate his pizza, and I was wrong. Genuinely, I was wrong. It was like,
is it really that good? Because I haven't been yet.
It is
good. Yeah.
Like, I was determined to give him both barrels of like, the world doesn't need this, Phil. Like, you're wasting your time. And actually, it is. I think Jay Rayner said it was the second best pizza in the world. That's not unfair. It really is.
Wow.
Pizza. Having worked in the burger world for a while, sort of better burger world, it's like pizzas are like burgers, right? They're so kind of context driven, and you can say you probably have. Everyone's got their favourites, whether you like this type or that type. But I would say consistently has been really good. And interestingly, with pizza at the moment, there's all this like mad nuance. The closer you get to the pizza world, there's all these nuance of if it's Neapolitan, there's London pizza, New York style slice. There's North London,
I like
North
Detroit.
London versus Detroit, deep pan, whatever. It's kind of all of this these different categories are proliferating, and I would say Breadstall is like something a bit like a sort of somewhere between a lot of different styles. It's a London slice.
A London slice.
Yeah.
But yeah.
It is now.
Nice.
Cool.